Hello, we are here for Aviation-Event Live TV. My name is Stefan Eiselin from aeroTELEGRAPH. I'm with Felipe de Oliveira. He's chief of ACI World, and I'm talking to you about regional airports, and the pandemic, and the war in the Ukraine, of course. So let's start with that rather sad subject. Are you in contact with your airport members in Ukraine?
Yeah, we have a structure that is a global and regional structure. That's why the responsibility of being in touch with these members is from ACI Europe. They are doing a fantastic job in conveying the information in the global level, and basically they come out with a fantastic program that is a partnership with Airlink to support and relieve goods and services for the refugees that are around Ukraine.
How do you think this war will affect airports in Europe especially?
Well, I think the first point is our hearts and minds goes to the people that are affected. That's I think that's the biggest impact that we have. In addition, of course, the restrictions of the air traffic is causing long flights, more carbon emissions, and more costs, especially in the high fuel prices. That is also another issue. And we expect, of course, that sooner than later we have a peaceful decision, and that will help, of course, to continue the recovery process that we already started a couple of months ago.
The industry comes from another crisis. We have had the pandemic, 2 years. It was the worst crisis in the industry for 50 years, probably. How do airports recover right now? What is your feeling?
Well, I'm an optimist by myself, and I try to push that for the whole industry as well. And we are seeing good signs of the recovery this year. The reduction of the restrictions around the world in terms of travel, the reduction of restrictions, health restrictions as well to travel, reduction of lockdowns and the needs of travel, tests to travel as well. So we believe that this year will be a big turning point for the industry. We expect, of course, the domestic markets will recover faster than international markets. And at the end of this year, we probably will have a 70% what we will have in 2019. And that's a good sign to going forward to reach the full recovery, basically the numbers of 2019 in 2024.
Do you see any regional patterns which are different?
Yes, countries or regions that depends on domestic markets are recovering much faster than international markets. Good examples like Mexico, for example, they never closed, they never used lockdowns as a tool to block the travel in the country. And basically they are now more than 100% of the numbers they had in 2019. US is doing very well as well. Big countries like Brazil, like India, are doing very well as well. The most affected ones are the international hubs. That's why Middle East is heavily affected in terms of the passengers, in terms of the revenues, and Asia as well continues to recover in the very small, very slow pace compared to the other parts of the world.
Let me go back. During the pandemic, many airports were on the brink of bankruptcy. What was the most difficult part for you and your members?
And how to help and how to convince the governments to reopen. I think we, as an international organization based in Montreal, have a strong contact with ICAO, especially the International Civil Aviation Organization. We have the ways that you can prove to the world that we had the guidelines to reopen the airports around the world, and ICAO, through the CART process, the Council of Aviation Recovery Task Force, bring the guidelines to the countries. However, the countries at the end are sovereigns and took their own decisions. That's why the biggest part and the biggest issue to also cope with the financial crisis of the airports is the harmonization of the process. If you have a process that is harmonized and open of the countries harmonized way, we will have, of course, the recovery coming much faster.
Are you, you said you're a positive person. Do you think if we ever have another pandemic, will governments act differently? Or do you think they will fall back to the same pattern?
Well, that we expect. I think we need to listen what's happened before, and the lessons learned with this process, I think, will help us to take the right decisions in the future. Unfortunately, I think we need to be serious. That is not the first and not the last pandemic or global impact that we have in the industry. We have some ones before. but what I expect that you never had something similar with the global and the long impact that we had with the COVID-19 pandemic.
What do you expect from governments apart from the pandemic? How do you think they should support airports? Airports, after all, are public infrastructure. Do you get enough support?
Well, we are very positive about the support that the governments bring to the airlines during the whole pandemic. You know, IATA at a certain point was publishing the numbers. The last number I saw is more than $230 billion. And in the airport side, we receive around $25 billion, basically in US. And what we are not seeing as well is the whole aviation ecosystem. We are airports and airlines, but we need to rely on the other services that are provided by the industry as well, ground handlers, restaurants, duty-frees, that were heavily affected as well. That's why in certain ways the government needs to look not only for the airlines and airports, but look for the whole aviation ecosystem. And of course, we need to rethink the way that the airports and airlines relationships will be drive in the future with a revision of the charges ways that the governments and the regulatory framework is applied on the aviation sector.
There's another big problem around the corner. It's a climate crisis, so it will not get boring for you in your job. What do airports do to tackle this crisis?
Well, the airports are very well advanced on that. We have for at least 10 years the airport carbon accreditation. That's why we are already working on the net zero emissions by our airports from 10 years to now. We are the first international organization in aviation sector that launched the net zero carbon emissions by 2050, globally speaking. That's why we are working very hard on that. That's why as an airport, we are doing our part, but we believe that we need to work together as a whole industry to support and enable the implementation of sustainable aviation fuels, the hydrogen, the electric power as well. And we as an ACL world, we are working in guidelines to support the airports to do this implementation in the future.
Do you think airports can afford the investment into the new infrastructure? You mentioned it. It will be electric, there will be hydrogen, there will be SAF, there will be classical combustion still. This will mean you need different infrastructures. How expensive is that, and can they invest and afford that?
Well, it's not easy at all, especially when we're talking about different sizes of the airports, the financial stress that the airports are facing because of the pandemic as well. That's why you have a long way to do, a long-term investments you need to do. And the support on the green finance, I think will be very welcome by the airport industry, because if you have the way that you can invest and make the things happen that will revert to the society and to the community as well is very important. It's good to mention that the airports are based on the number of the passengers. That's why if you don't have the passengers, we don't have any kind of a business model that will support the continuity of the feasibility of the airports in the future. That's why we need to find a way that the green activities that we support and will be implemented in our airports in certain way are financed, and the governments needs to take the right actions in terms to help us with the finance and not tax more without reinvest in the system.
One last thing is airports as a passenger. Do you think how do airports have to change in the passenger journey? What do they have to do that it gets more convenient, faster? I mean, as a passenger, the most time you spend is on the airport and not on the plane.
Yeah, that's a really good question, especially now. And I think when we discuss with people that used to travel a lot, the difficulties to travel today, that's why how we can harmonize the systems and you have a better journey at the airports. We have the most comprehensive program for passenger experience in the world. It's called Airport Service Equality. When we have 400 members out of our 2,000 members in the world that you help these airports to reach the levels of passenger experience, that you provide a good experience at the airport, and you provide, of course, the implementation of health and hygiene measures as well that will help the airports to cope with the aspects of the hygiene and health, and also with the passenger experience. And we are now bringing the award for more than 100 airports that cope with this development, and we are very happy to see that, and it's something that we need to continue to do.
What is for you a good airport? You know, are you happy to in an airport, and when do you get irritated as a passenger?
Well, it's very difficult to talk. We have a very different airports in the world, and I cannot blame and I cannot say that the one is better than the other. But I think when you have the seamless passenger experience, that you go through the process, you understand the process, you have a good signing, and you know where you need to go, is a good approach. You know, usually when I travel, sometimes I have some VIP service that helps me to go to A to B, and sometimes I don't communicate that I'm going to try the passenger journey as a normal passenger, and that helps my job as well to comment with the CEOs of the airport what I'm seeing and how we can improve. That's why the seamless passenger, that I have more time to spend in a restaurant, the VIP lounge, or even in the free shop, is the best way to do that. So I can have a pass through the process, the normal process, in the fast and easy way, and I have time to enjoy the airport environment at them.
Okay, thank you very much, Luis, for coming here. This was Aviation Event Live TV. Let's see the next show.